This is the promised PC gaming handheld that's been desired ever since Valve announced that they were considering putting SteamOS on devices besides the Steam Deck. The Lenovo Legion Go S is the first gaming handheld that is running Valve's fantastic gaming operating system to be manufactured outside of the Portal people. And today, we're going to take a look at it, see if it lives up to the hype, see where Valve is still outpacing everyone else, and ultimately let you know if we recommend you pick up this super dark blue portable gaming computer. So up front, you should know that there are actually two different versions of the Legion Go S. The lower end version is using AMD's Z2 Go processor, and the higher end version is using the Z1 Extreme, the same chip that you'll find in the original Legion Go, ROG Ally, and others. Don't let the Z2 name confuse you. The Z2 Go is actually based on older CPU and GPU architectures than what you find in the Z1E. The one we're reviewing today is the Z1 Extreme version to see what the best possible scenario is for a non-Steam Deck SteamOS handheld, and we'll be mostly pairing it up against the flagship Steam Deck OLED, comparing the best to the best. Also to note, while there are two main hardware differences in the Legion Go S, there are also two operating systems on offer. The dark blue one indicates that it's running the Half-Life stuff, and the white one is the Windows offering. Again, we're just looking at this one today. If you want to see how a Z1 Extreme performs in Windows, you can go watch our original Legion Go review right up there. But let's also go over the rest of the details that are featured in this Go S. The Z1 Extreme means that it has an 8-core, 16-thread Zen 4 CPU and a 12 compute unit RDNA 3 GPU. The Steam Deck, by contrast, only has 4 cores, 8 threads from Zen 2, and only 8 compute units from RDNA 2. It's a custom chip that Valve and AMD worked on together, but was already generations behind when it launched. The Legion Go S isn't just packing in the CPU and GPU department either. It also comes with a massive loading of 32 gigabytes of LPDDR5X RAM running at 7,500 megatransfers compared to the Steam Deck's 16 gigs at 6,400. And as far as storage, we're looking at 1 terabyte for both of these puppies, and they both support Wi-Fi 6. Just based on pure specs alone, the Lenovo console looks to be a massive step up in a lot of ways, but we'll get into the actual benchmark numbers in a bit after we take a look at a few other things it has to offer. Another strength that the Legion Go S has is its ports. The Steam Deck keeps it simple with a single USB-C port capable of taking in 45 watts, putting out DisplayPort, but only data transfer at USB 3.0 Gen 2 speeds. Lenovo, though, stuffed 2 full USB 4 ports on this one, both capable of taking in 65 watts and putting out DisplayPort 1.4 and transferring data at 40 gigabits per second. For the Windows version, that means decent eGPU support. You can still get that with SteamOS, but your GPU selection is going to be way more limited. Besides the doubled up USB ports, the two consoles are mostly the same after that. A headset audio jack and a micro SD card reader. Thankfully, that means both of them can expand your storage in case you're a hoarder who needs to keep games you barely play on the console, just in case. But regardless of what ports you can shove your stuff into on a handheld, if it sucks to hold, then those holes don't do you any good. Thankfully, the ergonomics on the dark blue console are good. It comes in at over 120 grams lighter than the OG Legion Go, with the controllers attached. 1.6 pounds is the full hand heft you'll deal with, which is a good 90 grams heavier than the Steam Deck OLED. And while 90 grams doesn't seem like much, I definitely noticed the difference. The Go S feels heavier in the hand, and part of that is thanks to its girthier nature too. My hands have to open up wider, and therefore I think it makes it more susceptible to feeling the strain of the console. But it makes up for it by being more comfortable to hold thanks to its more rounded edges that sit in the meat of the palm and the anti-slip texture that makes sure it stays put too. The Steam Deck is also thinner on the center section where the screen is, but it's also wider than the Lenovo by just a few dog hairs and shorter by just a few more hairs than that. But button placement on the Legion Go S is super comfortable, at least in my mitts. It's got the asymmetrical joysticks, which are Hall effect a bonus. And on the left side, you also get a large pivot D-pad that was satisfactory for my non-fighting game needs. And then above that, you have the Steam and View buttons for navigating the operating system, similar to what you'd find on the Steam Deck. And on the back, you have a Y1 button for you to configure to your heart's content. On the right side, you get the menu and quick access buttons, the ABXY doodads, and a mini trackpad, which I hated to use. It was too small for my thumbprint, and I ended up not having the dexterity to use it effectively in games or in desktop mode, so I just resorted to using the thumbsticks. Maybe it'll be more usable for tinier digits, but I could have skipped having this. On the back right, you will be also met with a Y2 button as well. The shoulder and trigger buttons are well placed and responsive, and the triggers are adjustable with either short throw or full travel with a switch to select between the two. And thankfully, these are also Hall effects. Another boon. Overall, my large hands had a great time gripping the Legion Go S for hours. It's less fatigue than on the Steam Deck since my palms were open to a more natural state due to the extra thunk that the Go S provides. Obviously, this will be subjective based on your hand size and how you like to hold consoles, but I've always preferred the girthier handhelds like the Legion Go, and that hasn't changed here. I'll also take a moment here to talk about another one of the Legion Go S's strengths, the speakers. Thanks to the deeper cavern that the speakers have and the extra thickness on the body, they sound richer and fuller than what you get on the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck OLED speakers are a touch louder, but it sounds thinner and like the sound is being blasted straight at you, whereas the noise on the Legion Go S is more preferable to my ears. But while the speakers are a +1 to the Legion Go S, the screen is a -1. To be clear, the screen on the Lenovo is good. 8 inches, 1920 by 1200 resolution, 500 nits brightness, 100% sRGB color, and 120 Hz refresh rate. It's a solidly competent display. Not as pixel dense or as fast as the OG Legion Go, but I'd argue that was always overkill anyways. 1200p, 120 Hz is a great middle ground for making sure you're taking full use of what the screen has to offer with the lower power of a gaming handheld. But the screen on the Go S is just good. The screen on the Steam Deck OLED is amazing. Resolution and refresh rate are a touch lower, but that hardly matters with the insane color contrast of OLED. It's super fast response time and the crazy 1000 nits brightness that you get for HDR, or even the 600 nits you get for SDR content. The Steam Deck OLED screen was the best in the handheld market when it dropped, and it's still no contest compared to the new Lenovo competitor. And while it's only 7.4 inches instead of 8, because of the shape and design of the consoles, it wasn't as stark of a difference swapping between the two. The original Legion Go screen was noticeably bigger, but the Go S isn't so much. But what good is a fantastic screen if you're not powering it properly? I've always held the unpopular opinion that the Steam Deck is underpowered, and oh boy, does the Legion Go S help to prove my point. The extra CPU cores, newer architecture for both the processor and graphics, and extra GPU compute units really shine on the Legion Go S. The Z1 Extreme isn't new by any means, but it was always kinda hampered by Windows. I did just a couple quick comparisons between a Z1E on Windows and the Legion Go S, and it was about 10% faster just running SteamOS. The Steam Deck has always punched above its weight class thanks to its software, and now the Z1E can really spread its legs in performance with it running the same go-go juice. We ran a bunch of gaming tests, and the bottom line is that when you're at full power on both consoles, the Legion Go S is anywhere from 45 to 75% faster in raw FPS at the same resolution and settings. Something like CS2 saw the Steam Deck hitting 53 FPS average at 800p resolution high settings, while the Legion Go S managed 90. Returnal did 44 FPS on the Legion Go S, but only 25 on the Steam Deck. Overall, the Z1 Extreme just wipes the floor in performance terms. Its performance at 1920 by 1200 is basically the same as the Steam Deck's performance at 1280 by 800. So you can choose between higher resolution or faster FPS on the Legion Go S. It has the hardware to run it. Also, part of that isn't just the better APU from AMD. The extra RAM helps a lot too. When we reviewed the ROG Ally X last year, we found that just bumping up to 24 gigs of RAM over 16 was enough to give the Ally X a significant performance boost. And I believe the same thing is happening here with the Go S versus the Steam Deck. For example, I actually couldn't even boot into some saved games on the Steam Deck because it would run out of RAM and crash, whereas it ran just fine on the new Legion Go. If a game was struggling to run on the Steam Deck for you, it'll zoom on the Legion Go S. It's got the goods. Admittedly, that is when it's at its fastest power profiles. When maxed out in performance mode, the Legion Go S is sucking roughly 38 total watts of power across the CPU, GPU, and screen. The Steam Deck, however, maxes out at roughly 24 watts. When you put the Legion Go S in its balance mode, it settles in at roughly 24 watts as well. At that point, the performance gap between the two consoles isn't nearly as large. Instead of a 60% gap in FPS, it drops down a smidge to be between 27 and 57% better in the games we tested. And then at the low power profile for the S, that's equivalent to a 10 watt TDP on the deck. And there, the lead that the Z1E has drops a bit. Most games are about just 20% faster on the Legion at that point. But while 20% is a smaller percentage gain, a lot of these mean that you're going from sub 30 FPS on the Steam Deck to over 30 FPS average on the Legion Go S. A healthy gain that makes it way more playable. I also tested all of our games at 5 watt TDPs for poops and teehees, and both consoles suck at major AAA games at this setting. The Z1E is sometimes 300% faster, getting almost 15 FPS in Cyberpunk versus the Steam Deck's 4.5, but they're both pretty useless for fancy games. It'll be more than enough to play your PS2 titles though. But what good is great performance on a gaming handheld if it dies as soon as you unplug it from the wall? Thankfully, that doesn't happen with the Legion Go S, but battery life isn't exceptional either. The batteries on the Steam Deck OLED and Lenovo console are remarkably close in capacity despite the Legion's much larger chassis. The Steam Deck has a 50 watt-hour capacity while the Go S has a 55.5 watt-hour setup. Practically, the difference ends up being basically none. At the exact same resolution, game settings, power profiles, and brightness levels, the battery life was essentially identical on both consoles. Balance mode on the Legion Go S is identical to the fastest TDP setting on the Steam Deck, and while the Legion Go S gets more FPS at this setting, they both get about just over 2 hours of battery life at this equivalent setup. Technically, the Steam Deck did win with 2 hours and 16 minutes versus the Legion's 2 hours and 6 minutes. The same idea happens with the Legion Go S's low power mode versus 10 watts on the Steam Deck. 3 hours and 18 minutes on the Steam Deck, or 3 hours and 15 minutes on the Legion Go S. But again, the games are running faster on the Lenovo. And low power is the last default setting on the Lenovo handheld, but you can drop them even lower if you want using TDP limits. You can go down to just 3 watts of TDP on the Steam Deck, but the Legion Go S's limit is 5 watts. And at a comparable 5 watts, both managed over 6 hours of battery life. At that point, AAA games likely are unplayable, but for emulators or old school games, you can get a good chunk out of both batteries on either console. And just to note, if you're running the Legion Go S at its full power profile, which the Steam Deck can't match, then you're able to get roughly an hour and a half out of its battery life. But again, you're pulling roughly 40 watts and you're sucking down more juice than what the Steam Deck can actually manage. But while on the same TDP, the battery life's about the same, the Legion Go S does have a leg up technically over the Steam Deck because it supports 65 watts of rapid charging. You're looking at 65% increase in battery life in just half an hour. So while the batteries might be the same in how long they'll live, you'll be back up and running on battery quicker on the Legion Go S than you will on the Steam Deck. So there's a lot to love about the Legion Go S, but I do have a few gripes, some of which I've already addressed, but I just want to spell them out here more concisely. The screen is just sad when you put it side by side to the big, beautiful, bright OLED that the Steam Deck is rocking. So very few other handheld companies have done an OLED upgrade, and it's a right shame. A Legion Go S with an OLED screen would satisfy me so deeply that I'd forget about any other problem I have with this console. Theoretically, the Legion Go 2 is supposed to be getting an OLED upgrade, but that doesn't help me here none. And while the ergonomics of the Legion Go S are legitimately good, it is considerably bulkier than the Steam Deck OLED. Heavier, thicker, and a bit more tricky to sling around. But the biggest biggest issue I have with that isn't the size itself, but rather that it wasn't put to good use, mostly in terms of battery capacity. Its thickness isn't really used to add much in the way of the size of the battery, contrasted to something like the Ally X that increased its size, and it doubled its battery capacity up to 80 watt hours. Now, this is technically a higher capacity than the original Legion Go, since that also was roughly around 50 watt hours, but it's not a substantive difference. The Legion Go S is a weird compromise versus the original. It's got slightly higher battery capacity, double the RAM, lower resolution screen, lower refresh rate, way smaller trackpad, and you lose out on the True Strike controller gimmick/feature that defined the original Legion Go. And if you look at the Windows version of the Go S, it's currently $300 more expensive despite all of its losses. Even without the original sale price, the Legion Go S represents a $150 price hike, mostly for double the RAM. But again, you're losing so many other things that the price is baffling. And now's a good time to go over the value that is or isn't there for the Go S. At $829.99 for the SteamOS version, it's a pretty penny. Not as bad as the Windows variant, that's 70 bones more, but still pricey. But that's still 27% more expensive than the Steam Deck OLED, which you can get, not on sale, for 650 US bucks. But for 27% more money, you're getting 50+% better gaming performance, which on a dollar to FPS basis ain't too shabby. It turns out that the Z1 Extreme matters a lot. Double the RAM, double the CPU cores, newer architecture, way beefier GPU, higher TDP, it's all there. If you want the fastest SteamOS gaming handheld, this is it. The Steam Deck OLED is way better for prettiness. The screen just absolutely slays. And if you're just looking to have a handheld that'll run local remote play and isn't going to be running the games natively, then this is such a smarter move. But even though the Legion Go S makes more sense just comparing those two consoles, there's more to the story. The Z1 Extreme is kinda old at this point. Handhelds with the Z2 Extreme are now starting to ship in certain parts of the world, like the MSI Claw. The only problem is that there's no ETA on when those will get SteamOS, which is the main advantage to picking up either of these graphical goers. But if you get the Legion Go S, who knows how long you'll be relevant for, especially with the Legion Go 2 rumored to have the Z2E chip. Which, let's talk about the real value play you should be looking at. The OG Legion Go is on sale right now for less than the Steam Deck OLED, and you can install SteamOS on it by using the recovery that exists for the new Go S variant. Reece, the deal master here at UFD Tech, has been running his Legion Go that way, and he says it's an absolute dream. You will be missing out on some of the advantages that the extra 16 gigabytes of RAM provide you, but you'll be saving hundreds of dollars as well. And let's not even try to kid ourselves that the Windows version of the Legion Go S makes any sense. Number one, we already talked about how it's a really bad value compared to something like the original Legion Go, but it's also a bad value compared to something like the ROG Ally X. The Asus handheld might only have 24 gigs of RAM, but it has a much bigger battery, coming in at 80 watt hours and lasting way longer. And they're the same price, not on sale. The Ally X will give you a much better unplugged experience, and you can get SteamOS installed on those as well. So the true conclusion is that it's a real mixed bag. If you want a new handheld that has SteamOS and is the fastest one on the market, the Legion Go S with the Z1 Extreme chip fits the bill. But if you want the best value gaming handheld, I still might end up recommending the Steam Deck LCD. Much cheaper, slightly worse screen, but given that they're coming up on their 2-year anniversary and a replacement could be coming anytime in the next year or so, it's not the worst long-term play if you're holding out for something that has an actually new chip, even if it's not Valve who's releasing it. I love the Legion Go S though. I'm going to be using it over my Steam Deck OLED, but let me know what you think down below in the comments. Also, be sure to let me know if you want me to check out the Z2 Go version of the Legion Go S and give that a review as well.